Welcome to The Brave Journey Within with Jim and Jenn. This show is about the spiritual journey and all of the challenges, healing, wisdom, and consciousness expansion experienced along the way.
Welcome back to another edition of The Brave Journey Within with Jim and Jenn. Welcome, Jenn.
Hey there, how's it going?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. We're riding the wave here.
So, we were trying to figure out what to talk about today, and we decided we were just going to pull some cards and go with it.
You have no idea where we're going. Well, maybe a tiny little bit, but yeah, no. And I really, it's interesting because I am fascinated by obviously the world that we live in and the universe that we live in that is slowly becoming more evident to people and opening up. And so I really enjoy talking about these things. So we'll get into it and share some of the knowledge and information from my Galactic Heritage card deck by Lisa Royal Holt. So that is more or less what the deck looks like. Um, and so for today, the card that I picked and the sort of topic we'll get into is fusion and magic. So this is the card. And on this deck of cards, it talks about essentially a lot of galactic type history. And so for this card, it talks about it being in the present in our lives and that it's also a mirror of things that happened with the Orion star system in the Orion, I guess, race gen. I don't know. Would you call it a race
I would just say group.
group? Okay.
Collective group, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll start. I'll read a little bit of history because it is one of those things where once I started learning about, like Hollywood and stories and science fiction, it became apparent that the truth was stranger than fiction. It was like, oh wow, these things are not necessarily fiction, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
which is mind blowing, by the way, when you realize that. I remember the first time someone said to me, like Star Wars, that actually happened. It's
Yeah,
like,
I know.
what?
I was like, "What?" Yeah, it was with Star Wars too. Someone said, "Yeah, I think they were channeling," and I'm like, "What?" Now
Yeah.
I think he was told what to write. I don't know if he was channeling or not, but who
I was
knows?
told George Lucas was channeling that.
Yeah,
Yeah. And,
that's what I
and
was told too, but I'm not so sure.
yeah. Um, well, so I guess we'll talk a little bit about the Zetas and then get into Orion. So for the Zeta Reticuli, for those that don't know, many people call them the Greys or gray aliens, right? Now, in this, they don't use that term because of the disinformation surrounding it. So, like anything, there's lots of truth and also lots of disinformation about certain
Yeah,
things. Um, so, the story of the Zetas is written in the book Visitors from Within. It is difficult for us to tell you the whole story of the Zetas in a short time. Many people attribute the abductions to these beings, in which humans claim to have been taken and DNA samples extracted. This was for the purpose of saving their species. Eventually, it was a success. The DNA that saved their species was actually human. These beings are not negative. They are not the ones people talk about, sometimes inaccurately. Parentheses. Um, People talk about it as doing terrible things. Some of that information is disinformation. This was a species in crisis. Through the willingness of souls on Earth, you were able to help them. They are strongly represented in the card deck. The relationship between humans and Zetas is profound. Quite simply, you have helped each other evolve as species. Returning to Vega, so the Vega star system or the Vega group, many groups colonized beyond the Vegan system. The area that is now called Orion was one of those places where colonization from Vega and in parentheses and Lyra happened. Just want to add that um, in the whole disclosure movement, my understanding is that when that happens and open contact happens, it will be the Lyrans that are the group that is the first sort of off the ship. So,
Well, that would be interesting for sure. Yeah.
so
Yeah, I've not heard about that. So that's very interesting.
um, what happened in Orion was very dramatic. Many of you know the story. And if you don't know, you're going to find out.
Yeah.
So, this was the place of the deepest polarity that your galactic family has ever experienced. A simplistic way of explaining it is as follows. First, there was a dominating force, which we can call the Orion Empire. Think of it as 1,000 times more repressive than communism. So this is not good. The empire represses the people. The repression was so bad that there was even energetic repression. Because Vegan mysticism was brought to Orion, they had a lot of spiritual practices. The empire found a way to create an energetic net, which there is a lot of stuff about that out there now. But this energetic net went around the Orion planets and kept souls in. So when people died, they would have to enter the reincarnational cycle only within Orion. They could not leave. Because of this intense repression, there was resistance formed. So now you have three different aspects: the empire, the people who were being repressed, and then the resistance that was created. The closest translation of this resistance group would be the words Black League, black meaning hidden. And if you look at popular culture on Earth right now, the closest analogy we can give is one of the Star Wars movies. You have
Mhm.
an empire, and the Jedi were like the Black League, um, which is interesting to me because this story is so deeply resonant with people,
Yeah.
in our culture. The repression and the cycle of resistance went on for a very long time. The whole story of Orion would take many hours. This is a very short version. Eventually, the Orion civilization experienced an awakening. It was through the birth of what we can call an Orion Christ, that I'm not entirely sure about, Orion Christ, that began the process of integration. They eventually awakened rapidly. However, during some of the dark times, a myth began to emerge. This myth was about a place called Earth, where people were free, parentheses, or at least freer than they imagined they were. Because the origin of our species has its own stuff
Right.
too. Um, Sometimes the Orion priests who were involved with the resistance could open holes in the net that was surrounding their planet. And when that happened, souls would escape and enter the reincarnational cycle of Earth. Earth became a place where Orion energy also had to be healed. That drama was brought here. This is why in the cards you will see many Orion cards, because Orion's spiritual awakening is very tied to Earth. Even though Orion already had its awakening, it hasn't yet happened on Earth, although I would say it's starting to happen now.
Mhm.
The Orion drama became part of the karmic energy of Earth and is still in the process of finishing up the final healing of the polarities from Orion. So that is a very brief history of that. You following all this, Jen?
I'm following it.
It's funny sometimes you like, you get into these things, you're like, man, It's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Like, can't believe I'm talking about this stuff at this point in my life. Um, so it's fascinating. So anyway, in coming up with what we're going to talk about today, I pulled a card from Orion, and it's titled Fusion and Magic. And I'll get
Mm.
into this card in particular. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this deck is that it's sort of there's an energy transmission of sorts that it happens with this energy. So that this is communicating this energy to us now. So the Orion energy, deeply polarized, went through a dramatic healing process in which those polarities fused together to create a powerful energy that fueled their society's transformation. Whenever two forces collide within us, it creates a process of fusion that releases an intense energy for manifestation. Didn't know we were going to go there, did we? This is the basis of what we call magic, the fusion of two opposite energies that are harnessed and directed in a desired way. This is why it is important to embrace both the shadow and light sides within us. We then create magical transformation. Embrace your abilities as a magician. So, for the commentary on this card, it says that this card refers to the era of Orion history in which polarity conflicts were beginning to heal. It was a volatile time that contained many miracles and transformations. Imagine taking two very powerful magnets and making them repel each other. As you move the magnets closer together, despite their resistance to each other, energy coalesces in between the magnets and becomes more pressurized. If the force that brings the magnets together surpasses the resistance, the energy created initializes a type of fusion that collapses resistance, reverses poles, and creates rapid integration. This is what happened in Orion. These energetic principles are the basis for certain forms of magic. This type of integration cannot be forced or controlled. It usually happens during a time of great resistance. This card may be coming up for you because there is something you are resisting in your reality. Eventually, you will be forced to surrender to the powerful force of energy guiding this transformation. This card may be referring to a past life or a present situation. This is a powerful card of transformation, but it also contains a warning about your own resistance to change and growth. If you continue to resist, be ready for lots of intense energy and chaos around you before transformation can occur. If you wish to avoid that chaos and intensity, simply let go and follow the flow. Even if you think it is taking you somewhere you don't want to go, it is possible that the flow is taking you somewhere you need to go.
Wow. You know,
Interesting, yeah.
what's coming to mind with me is, I listen to Dave Wilcock. He's been coming on doing lives, I think, like every Sunday, and he's had some really interesting ones. And he's one of the main people that brought the law of one into people's awarenesses, and
Hmm.
so he's been going deep into some of the law of one teachings. And what he's been saying a lot about is, you know, there are opposing forces in our experience. There's the positive and the negative, the good, the evil, white, dark, whatever you want to call that, right? But there are opposing forces. And in the law of one, they call, if you are like a light worker and you're trying to do, I don't know, let's say you're stepping into your mission work and you're doing things. Well, the more you step into what you're doing and trying to help people and be of service, the more you're going to get visited by negative beings. And in the law of one, they call it greetings because they don't want you to be afraid of this. Um, it truly is about you coming into your own power and standing in love. But at the same time, it's also understanding that somehow, some way, you as a soul, you are allowing this to occur, this attacks. So a lot of people call it like I had a negative attack or I was visited by an entity and, it attacked me or something, right? It feels very negative. And so what he was saying and what I really agree with is that, we call these experiences in and because it's meant to show something about us. So it could be a karma that we're correcting, or it could be a lesson we need to learn, or it could be mirroring off of our anger and frustration. When we hold these energies, it's like a wide open door allowing certain things to come into our experience. And so we use these as a technique to transform ourselves. So as these things are showing up, they're around us all the time. Most people just don't realize they're around. And these opposing forces, however it is you want to look at it. I've seen books where they call it, the white t-shirts and the dark t-shirts, or, like just to get you to realize that it's not, calling it good and evil, things like that. It just brings so much fear into it all. But these forces do exist. And I think the magic in this, what's coming up for me is the magic in it. It's recognizing that all of it can be used for your transformation, whether you've got great things happening or what you might perceive as negative things happening or whatever the case may be. You can have it come into your experience and your awareness to just really create the situation you want. So this, or the situation you really need to go through. It's all about your own soul's growth and healing. And without these opposing forces, we don't know what those are. So these forces really bring us to a whole different level.
I don't remember the part about greetings. Is that so? Is like I know from a Buddhist perspective when I was learning about Buddhism, typically younger males would go into training, as novices, and then if they were going to pursue that path, to become a monk. I remember being warned that as you chose that path, that there would be sort of scary things.
Mhm, mhm.
I guess I want to say the word ghosts or spirits, but like essentially like things that would blow your mind and would come up and try to dissuade you from pursuing that path. Is that what in a sense greetings are? Is it like to dissuade you or somehow manipulate you in some way off the path of a positive ascension?
Usually, yeah. I mean, so they do try to put so much fear into us, or they will, if they are not as direct, they will just amplify your fears. So let's say you're afraid of stepping forward in your mission to do podcasts, they will come in and amplify your anxiety. Or they might come in and manipulate people around you to try to create chaos and friction. They do that. And it happens especially right before a breakthrough. So you're working through something. And if you're about ready to break through and hit like a new level of service or success in some way, they will come in basically to try to destroy it, make it so that you can't do that. And so, of course, there are many different ways to look at that. You can feel like a victim to it. You can be afraid of it. You can, when you say the word magic, so many times people are like, it's anti-God. No, it's really not. There are different forms of magic. But when we're talking about self transformation and using magic in your own life to come closer to our creator and to be the best person you can be, that's what to me what this is talking about. It's taking, we all have shadow selves, we all have parts of us that need healing or that are less than what we would want it to be, right? Those things that we hide in a corner that we don't want other people to see. We all have those things. How do you integrate that? How do you heal it? How do you accept it and love it and move through it and become better? Mm.
It is so hard to be grateful or to see our challenges as blessings in a way.
Yeah.
And maybe blessings is a triggering word for some people, but I don't know. Like how else do you say it?
I like the word appreciation.
Appreciation.
Because maybe it's hard to love our difficulties or the people who are difficult, maybe we're not quite there yet. But if you can appreciate the fact that on a soul level, this situation, that negative entity or that person or whatever it is that feels like it's working against you, if you can appreciate what it's trying to do for you ultimately and how you as a soul are agreeing to that in some way and what that might be serving for you, if you can appreciate it, it takes resistance away.
Which is the big thing, right? Like,
Right.
we keep clinging to things that we think keep us safe. Um, I mean, I see it all the time. I catch myself doing it too, right? Like, even our suffering can be comfortable in a way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it's interesting. I came across, this quote earlier, or what do they call it? A meme? I don't know. It's like the beautiful photo with, a quote on it, but it says, "You get tested the most when it's time for you to elevate. Do not break. Get ready, beautiful soul. It's about to rain magic. I am ready."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And you just got to push through and believe in yourself and believe in what the universe is trying to show you, what God is trying to show you through that experience.
Jen, what, we talk about resistance and fighting resistance, but one word that comes up a lot in, sort of my research with things and like how to, is the word surrender?
Hmm.
What is your impression on that? Like how that process works, or what does that mean to you?
Yeah. It's funny. So surrender is always a funny word to me. Um, Because when you think surrender, you think, "Okay, I give up, I'm yours,"
Like
right?
a
"Do
weakness.
do what you
Yeah.
will," right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a opposite, I'm fighting you in some sort of war, and I surrender now, "Go ahead, white flag," right? "I'm now your prisoner." Like, that to me is what the word surrender always has meant. So when I think of surrender, it still has a little bit of that connotation for me. So what I usually say to myself is I say, okay, let's just release resistance for a minute. Let's release resistance to what is and what is it trying to show me. So if I say that, it doesn't feel like I'm giving up, just take me away. So like let's say for example, let's say somebody's losing everything. They just, they lost their job, they're losing their house, their car, like everything. It's just they're losing everything. They have a couple different points of view and options that they could try to do. They could fight it and being resistance and be angry and or they could just give up, right? And just be like, no, okay, I surrender. I'm gonna end up on the street, right? And neither of those is right, right? So what I think ultimately we're meant to do is we're meant to come into our power and to maybe analyze is the wrong word, but I tend to be pretty analytical. So you analyze, okay, what's going on here? What is this really trying to show me? Where have I been not loving enough? Where have I, been too closed off? Where, whatever the situation is, where have I not been doing what I know I should be doing in some way? Um, Usually for me, I start with the soul level and then I might work up to the physical. So maybe, I don't know, you're not working enough hours or something, right? Maybe it's more physical, but on a soul level, there's usually stuff there. And so I usually start deep and then work up to the top. And if you're really trying to figure out why things are falling apart and how do you just kind of accept where it's at and release your resistance, surrender might create more resistance if you're using that word. So if it's a word to you that creates like, oh, I don't want to surrender. I don't want to be end up on the street. If it means I give up, then that's not the right word to use because that's your connotation with it. That's how you think of it, even more subconsciously. So you want to find a word that feels more gentle, that feels more like you haven't lost all control because it's not, a lot of times when we think control, we think we're controlling things like I'm going to force this thing to happen. But as a soul, you are in control, right? So you do have power. And so where can you find your power? Well, it's not usually in the 3D way of looking at things, it's more in a soulful way where you access that divine power, your connection with the all that is, and you figure out, okay, well, what choice do I have in this moment? Okay, right now I can breathe. So you might call that surrender, right? You're surrendering into the moment of, I don't have this control here, right? And all these things are happening. So you're surrendering to that moment, but it's not a giving up. It's a,
Yeah.
it's it's a release of the idea that your egoic way of being can control anything.
Yeah, the image that comes up for me with surrender is sort of like, if you're at a beach and you get caught up in a rip tide or rip current, and if you fight it, you'll drown. But if you kind of, get into a survival stroke and you just kind of let it take you out, you'll come back in and you'll stay safe.
That reminds me of a funny video my brother sent me just yesterday. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I don't know what beach they were at or what was going on, but this woman, she was standing there, and there was a guy standing on the beach filming her, and he's like, "You don't know how to swim. What are you doing?" And she's just like, she starts to think that she needs to run because a big wave is coming in, and as she's running, she falls flat down, like, and then the wave comes and gets her and it pulls her in even further into the ocean. And then she's trying to get up and she's falling down. It's like it's like you're watching a scary movie and they just can't get away. So she keeps
Um
trying to get up and she falls down. There's this big wave comes and crashes on top of her. And then three lifeguards have to come and try to lift her up. But she was so like heavy with like the weight of, like, I don't know if she was laughing or what, but she couldn't, or in fear,
yeah.
but she could not stand up. And it took three of them to help her stand up. And they kept getting knocked over by these big waves that would just come and land on their heads. I was just like, wow, that's perfect for life and what we're talking about right now with what you just mentioned. It feels like those waves come and take you down. Yeah.
I have seen that video many times. It's hilarious.
I watched it like 10 times yesterday.
It's hard not to. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
this train wreck that keeps happening.
Yeah. But right, isn't that so what we're talking about right now? It's like if she would have surrendered in the way people think of surrender, like the ocean would have just taken her, you know? But if she was to freak out and get like try to control it, which is probably what she was trying to do, which is why she couldn't get up,
Yeah.
right? And so both forces were working against her in that way. Instead of maybe surrendering or releasing your resistance and coming to a higher place with it, and being able to then stand up or have someone else pick you up and not be in fear, it probably would have gone a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah. And like in that situation, but I think in terms of like even what I was describing with the rip current, like,
Mm,
in mindfulness, I mean, all these things that are happening to us, whatever they are, right? Like sometimes, there's a certain amount of fear perhaps in that, panic. What do I do? I'm getting hit right now. How do I get out of this? But if you're patient and more calm, you can sort of
mhm.
direct your energy to the wiser strategy. Like, all right,
Yeah.
if I can conserve my energy in this moment, this wave is going to recede, then that was the moment that I can focus in my strength and balance and get out of this,
Yes.
versus just wailing around and, getting hit by the next wave where it's like, come on now, like, let's get going. Like, you got to help yourself
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But patience is not, a lot of people struggle with that, myself included. That's probably been one of the bigger lessons in life that I continually work on. And then trusting the timing too. There's
Yeah.
something to be said for that, is is trusting the timing, and I think that's part of the surrender too. Um, not seeing surrender as giving up at all, um, but allowing that things are going to work out in a sense, in that, I think the card itself says, if you think it's taking you somewhere you don't want to go, it is possible the flow is taking somewhere you need to go.
Well, and a lot of times resistance is your fear, right? You're in fear of something. So there's a resistance to the thing. And it could be a resistance to the process, it could be a resistance to an outcome. So, like, for example, the person who's lost everything and their fear and their resistance would be, I'm going to end up on the street and I'm not going to have a home. I'm going to be homeless. So, if a lot of times what you do is you face your fears and you look at, all right, well, what if I do end up homeless? As soon as you face it, it takes that power away, right? And as soon as you think, oh, okay, well, I could end up homeless, but then what? Okay, well, there's resources. I could figure it. I can get another job. I could go live with so and so for a little bit. And okay, all right, well, now that fear is gone because you faced it. But as soon, when we resist looking at the fear, that resistance, it just controls us.
Well, something to be said about going with the flow on that and, you know, being cognizant of where you are in the now moment, which is the most important moment, and, seeing where that takes you. Um, Part of some of the adventures that I went on in my youth, traveling overseas and in South Asia and things, like, there was no way I could possibly ever know what was going to happen next. And
Yeah.
there was certainly fear, but there was also excitement attached to that. And I, I remember at one point just being like, "Man, this is really cool. I have literally no idea what that is that going to happen next." And
Wow.
it's just, for many people, I think I was at the right, I don't know, in the right frame of mind where I was open to that. Like, I just wanted adventure, and I like whatever happened was going to happen, and I was sort of ready to deal with that. But that can be a terrifying place for a lot of people because you want to know what happens next. But I think part of the times, or at least what I've seen with people, is when they start um, following their passions with things, or they start to really put some thought into that. For the ones that start to pursue it, like, you want to know that you're going to be successful in some way or another, and it's not always clear, right? Like, what how that path or what that's going to look like. And so there's a certain amount of trusting the timing, but this allowing that things are going to come in when they're ready, or that it's the right time for you. um, which, again, none of this is necessarily uh, comforting, but I think once you've had experiences, and I'm sure you've had, where it's like, okay, I had no idea that that was going to happen, but that was like a really beautiful thing. I went to this event, I met this person, this opportunity opened up, or whatever. um, just so many different uh, things in life that I've seen happen. Trying to think of like an example that is pertinent. I've had a lot of people, they say moving, for example, and there's like, oh, there's no houses available or something like that, and then all of a sudden, there's a need and a house opens up in like the perfect location
Right.
for this family or something, and you're like, well, how did that happen? And for some of them, like, it had to be divine providence or God or whatever. It's like, there was a need, and the universe brought it to you, like, at the right time.
Yeah, I've experienced that. Actually, the whole thing with finding a house, it was exactly that. And it was during 2021 when the market was crazy, and I think it's still crazy, but
Yeah.
it was crazy and people were getting 20, 30, 40 offers for their home. And we had to quickly find a home that had a specific certain setup.
Mhm.
And we were just like, "Oh my gosh, okay, well, all right, you guys help out," you know? And it just the way it happened, it was perfect. It was beautiful. We could not have planned it any better. And there were no other bids because the way this happened, there were no other bids on this house, and we just got it. Our house sold quickly. It was beautiful. Within months, we were moved.
So that's the whole thing, though, right? Like, you couldn't have scripted it.
No, no, it was amazing.
Like, if someone was like, "Hey, what's the best case scenario?" Well, this is could happen or whatever, and then,
Right.
when you trust, the universe conspires to make things happen as they should. I think that is a big challenge. And even as I say that, like, that's a challenge for me now. Like, I guess this is supposed to happen this way. Like, all right, let's see how this goes.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, well, everything that we want it because it's meant to take us down a journey. There's a process involved in it most of the time. So whether it's a house or it's a career or it's, I don't know, we're trying to step into our mission and we're doing some sort of work to be of service to others. There's a desire there. But that desire, not that the desire isn't important, but the desire is there to give us a reason to take action to do something. And so in that movement, we are meant to have challenges. And in those challenges, we have that growth that we need. And sometimes they're really hard challenges. And we have to look at the darkness within, and we have to look at what's going on around us, and how do we integrate and heal and move through and have courage and faith and surrender or release resistance to what's showing up, knowing that that's part of that process. Not easy.
No, but that's exactly what the card is talking about, right? Like
Yeah.
you're in the context of your transformation can happen very quickly, rapidly when you stop fighting it and
Yes.
allow it to happen,
Yeah.
which is tricky to do, and requires your awareness into what you really need. Like you need to constantly kind of evaluate like where you are with things. What is if there is something holding you back, what is it?
Yeah.
Is
And
starting to
there's,
identify it.
yeah. And it is a process, divine timing in all ways, right? Because you can't force an outcome before you're ready for it. So, let's say somebody really desires to be financially free, right? And to experience financial freedom where maybe they don't need to work a job anymore, or something like that, where they can just live life and enjoy and be of service or whatever, right? And if you're of, like, let's say in a past life they had experiences where they were really poor, and there's not that there's necessarily greed, but maybe a fear of not enough. Or maybe there's greed, but just like a fear of not enough in some way. Until they heal that, they may not receive that level of money or security, because they would just fly through it anyway. You see what I'm saying? So it's like
Yeah.
sometimes that desire to have more, or the experience of not having enough, it's there because we're meant to heal something. It's showing us what we need to work through. And then once that we've worked through whatever that thing is, then that abundance or whatever it is you're looking for can show up. Money's just an easy thing to look at, but you know, so many times though people are concerned about, okay, I need to make more money, or I have to have this money, or it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough. Well, it's not going to be enough until you heal your reasons for not having enough, and that can take time, because we're not always in the right alignment and the understanding of that, or um, like the answers. What I'm trying to say is almost like the answers that need to come through for whatever will resolve that experience. The timing has to be right too, and there needs to be an alignment. So I think a lot of times we like to think of things in terms of time, and we're not patient. We're like, why isn't this thing happening for us yet? It's because we're not ready.
Yeah, and then you internally it has to match, right? Like that frequency and vibration has to be resonant with what you are bringing in. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, like you get famous and you what, you squander it or you fall apart because you're
Yeah.
not, you know, not ready for it, or collectively, you I mean, you see it all over the world, right? Like in the beginning, the card was talking about Orion. They talked about the empire and communism, right? Like if you haven't worked on things within you, then repressive communism might sound like a lovely idea,
I
right? But
know.
there's some pretty dark
Yeah.
things inside of you that would allow that to come out in a way. So like it's almost like that trauma, you're working it out externally. But you said the word alignment, and I want to get into the next card that I
Yeah.
picked, which talks about it. And it's from the Starseed Oracle, which I don't know.
I love that set.
Do you use this? It's pretty cool,
I
right?
do, yeah.
That's like the first time I ever heard of the Hathors was through this, which we could talk about some other time. But so the card I picked is Lifting the Veil, and you can kind of see some of the artwork on this. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it says question everything, and then anything unaligned must go. And it says things aren't always what as they seem. This era is one of uncovering mistruths so we can remember ancient truths. Everything is in a state of recall and realignment. Anything that isn't in harmony with the planet will not survive. This goes for society and the world at large, as well as in our own lives. If you pull this card, you're being called to energetically scan your life for things that may no longer be a vibrational match for who you are and how you've grown. To dismantle the systems and ways of being that once served you and others but no longer do. Some star seeds are here to lift the veil between the seen and unseen worlds. I might take that to mean as above, so below.
Mm,
To shine a light on things that are inauthentic or unaligned with survival and with the survival and well-being of Earth. To stand for and protect those who don't have a voice. To look deeper and question everything that previous generations did not. Some starseeds cannot tolerate things that aren't congruent. They're here to bring society and humanity back into harmony with the planet and the Creator at large. If we tolerate things in our life that aren't aligned and congruent with it, we add to the misalignment of the planet. You're being called to trust yourself. Notice what's out of alignment and then take the baby steps required to bring back into harmony. This is no easy feat, but it's so worthwhile, both individually and for the planet. So it says for the inquiry, soul inquiry, two questions. What isn't congruent in your life? And then how are you being called to bring it back into harmony? So lifting the veil and what's not in alignment and how can you come back into harmony?
yeah.
So thoughts as you hear that, Jen? Any guidance coming through?
Well, I think, what was coming through for me as you were reading it is that process of, a lot of times, we're all here. If you think of relationships, we're all here to kind of help each other grow, and we mold each other, and we mirror each other, and see things about ourselves in other people, or we should maybe, and maybe we don't always. But when the time for that relationship is done, that relationship probably needs to end in some way. If there's no use for it anymore, it's going to probably end in some way. And I've seen so many different things. I've seen it, it ends very dramatically and not in a great way, and bridges are burned and everything comes crumbling down. I've seen where it ends in a good way, where it's loving, or I've just seen it kind of like drift apart. And but one way or another, it's going to end if it's not really serving any longer. So I think that's difficult for people, and it's such a process, and especially if you're in a committed relationship where you're trying to grow together, or the idea is you're meant to be together for a lifetime, or you've committed to each other in some long term way, even in business partnerships or something. And there's this commitment to work together and to grow together and to be of service to each other. So I think what's hard with that is knowing when that's done. When do you say enough is enough? It's done. We're good. Or, you're out. I cut that cord, you're gone. Whatever that is, because of wherever it ended up and whatever happened. But
That's always hard. I think, well, I shouldn't say it's always hard. I think for some people it's pretty easy. They just like, oh, I'm out. See ya. They don't really seem to care. Other
Yeah.
people are like holding on for dear life to things that really don't serve them anymore. I tend to kind of like, I think for me, I don't necessarily have a problem saying goodbye, but I also don't want to do it in a way that creates more karma for me. So I tend to be really patient and kind of loyal in a way. But at the same time, I'll have some boundaries. But it's almost like I let it kind of play out until it needs to fade. And sometimes I think maybe that was the wrong thing to do. Maybe I needed to we're
Just
done.
chop it off.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know. But I don't know. But I'm always really aware of, okay, what is the best way to make something happen when there needs to be a shift like that? And that to me tends to take more time. So if I'm getting impatient with something or wanting things a different way, I need to kind of get out of that and just be like, all right, what is the best approach here in this moment? What do I need to know or understand about this? And usually it's not, it's it's a gentler approach. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I mean, it depends, right? Like there's different forms of what so I would say sort of soul contracts and
Hmm.
like how we are showing up in someone's life or what we're supposed to bring to, the relationship
Yeah.
or not. Um it's not easy to be like discarded or like, hey, see ya. That can happen. It's
Hmm.
definitely not like a fun feeling. But in terms of what you're saying about creating karma, it's like, okay, if you can acknowledge in yourself, like, this relationship is ending, um, there's a lot of work that can be done with that. Like, okay, so what's my takeaway from this? Like, how can I make this constructive? Like, what do I need to change about myself, or how do I view myself in this
Right.
relationship, and how can I become a better person? um there's something called the Michelangelo effect, but let's say like you get discarded, right? Or in some type of relationship, or a lot of times people are projecting their own fears and stuff onto you, which we've mentioned before. But, how do I make myself better? How do I sculpt myself to become this masterpiece? Knowing that I have my flaws, but like I'm a work in progress. And if you can take that and I think utilize it in a once you go through your own grieving process, by the way, this is not like, oh yeah, I'm just going to be like a masterpiece now.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a grief, right? And then there's questions, there's a process that goes. But eventually, I think you get the word alignment to me is okay, what do I enjoy? What makes me happy? What makes me feel loved? And, like we all want to be loved, we all want to feel safe. How can I make that happen? Who are the people in my life that I should maybe pay more attention to that do that? They are feeling I am, they make me feel good. Um, you have a right to feel good. Like, it's a way better feeling than feeling bad about yourself. But part of, cultivating aligned views is seeing yourself in a loving way. Like if you love yourself, you will tend to not tolerate misbehavior of others, to my mind. Right? Like you're just not going to accept being treated poorly by someone if you truly love yourself. And then if you truly love yourself, you'll stand up, right? So it takes a lot of courage to kind of come into your power and communicate that with people, have healthy boundaries, say things assertively. um, there's just so much fear that exists in relationships too, right? Or
Hmm.
conversations that don't happen. um, and then having this examination or like this mindful awareness of like, how do I see myself, how do I see the world, how are my relationships, what do I want to change about them, what are the beliefs that I need to let go of? I can't tell you how many beliefs I've had about people, the world. I mean, I'm talking about freaking aliens on this podcast.
Right. I know.
Like, talk about adopting a view. It's like, would you ever talk about aliens ever? No. Like, okay, like those are changes, right? Like, so these shifts happen, and it's just this constant alignment of like, all right, well, what do I, what is serving me and what is not? Because if it's just not an easy thing, but if you're asking yourself the question sincerely, and you teach this, right? Like, all right, now be honest with yourself.
Mhm.
How are you manipulating yourself, and how do you manipulate other people? Remember the first time I heard you say that, I'm like, well, I don't do that.
You
And it's like,
definitely do.
wait a minute,
Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
Oh, what kind of piece of crap? It's like, wait a minute, like I gotta like actually like examine like what is the behavior that I do
Yeah.
that can be manipulative. And it's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And it's like we
Yeah.
all do it. Like, okay, like I'm not unique in that way, but I don't know. I mean, it's in a way fun work. And like if you're sincere about it, like you can have fun with this, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh gosh, I'm like doing like this psychotherapy on myself and trying to clean things up. Um anyway, I try to have fun with it like that a little bit.
Well, I think it's important too because if you don't do it that way, you end up feeling really bad about who you are because you're going to start finding all kinds of faults. And the point is that we all have these faults and we're just trying to shine a light on them so we can heal it and be better. And but so many times we just judge ourselves and we don't have the self-love to the level that we need it at. And so then when we're shown what's wrong with us, either by somebody else or just our own awareness, we just want to hide that baby. We're like, I don't even want to see it because I feel so bad about myself. So I think having fun with it is really important because you don't get so serious about it. And it's easier to be like, oh yeah, there's that thing I do. I do manipulate when I do that thing. Oh, interesting. What am I trying to get there? What is it I need when I do that?
Yeah. Um so I think that's really important, is just to highlight, bring an element of humor to all this. Like, don't I mean, I see it sometimes with people that I work with. It's like they're so embarrassed about something, and they're like afraid to acknowledge it to me. And it's like, I've been very embarrassed about things in my own life too, right? Like you're in a completely safe place. Like these are things that a lot of people don't do that kind of work and they don't acknowledge it, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist. People are very good at hiding things.
Yeah.
Right?
And we
So
all do it, right? We
yeah,
all have
yeah.
something that we're just like, I'm just not going to talk about that.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for anybody out there who's got things that they need to work through, go see Jim. You got something in a closet, go see Jim.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was probably one of the ones that came up for me too, right? It was like working with my own therapist. Just like, well, what are the things I don't say, when I'm in that space of safety that I don't want to talk about, I don't want to address. That sort of lie of omission, where it's like, okay, but then how am I really serving myself if I'm not willing to talk about it? Then how is this ever going to get resolved? You know,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially as long as you're in a safe and supportive space with somebody and you know that you're in that space of safety. Because not
sure.
everybody needs to hear all those dark secrets, because not everybody's safe.
No, but and no, like it's in service to being a better version of whatever, what you got
Right.
going on, and that you have how I perceive all of this is that no matter what you've done, you can redeem yourself and be a completely loving, compassionate human being that will help, you know, not only you, but your family, the people that are closest to you and that you love, and by default, like our society. So it's all this transformation, right? In a positive way.
Right. Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
resistance that happens tends to get worse before you get over the hump there. So I think that's what did we talk about? Fusion and harmony. So like going through
Magic and harmony.
magic and harmony. Um, yeah, which alchemy is another word that came up for me too, but
Yeah.
that's sort of profound transformation that you can bring into your life when you start to examine things. And really, it really does all go back to love. Like all of this goes back to
Yeah.
love. So,
Yeah. So true.
uh, well, Jen, any further thoughts or divine guidance?
I think the only thing I would say is don't be afraid of your dark side. Access it, see what's there, face it, face your fears, face your faults, your shame, whatever you're ashamed of. Just look at it, face it, heal it, make it right, whatever it is you need to do. Get to the point where all of that stuff feels neutral as best as you possibly can. And we can be like, oh yeah, I did that thing. And maybe even laugh about it if it's laughable. But you know, even the silly things, like the silly things you've done in life that you're just like, you still like cringe about, that really aren't even all that serious and could be funny, but you're just like, ooh, that time, I don't know, gosh. Face it and laugh about it and tell somebody about it and make it fun and let go of
Yeah.
that energy. Yeah.
Uh, love requires self-forgiveness too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll share the story as we wrap up. One of my mentors, who's a pretty famous meditation teacher, said, when I got, and I've heard this from like other people, when I got into meditation, like I really wanted to be the best at it, right? Like, and in a sense, like I wanted to be, I don't know, like a Buddha or something like that. But the word, when the guy was telling me the story, um, he was like, like I just kept thinking I was like Luke Skywalker, right? Like I'm a Jedi in training. I'm going to learn how to harness this power. And like as he was saying it, I'm that like I've kind of had that thought too, right? Like what is possible with that? And like, in this very nerdy kind of way, but it's like that fantasy of, okay, what is possible, like, but all of it's of course layered in this universal history that we all share, whether it's conscious or not, and that we're going through this time of transformation. But it's interesting to see how, I mean, that's really what they had to do, right? In terms of like the resistance and like overcoming evil, is you really have to face it, right? So you find a way to do that and realize your power.
Yeah.
So may the force be with you as you all, harness that energy. And no, you can laugh at thinking of me doing that too.
Well,
uh,
thanks, Jim.
Jen, thank you. And thank you for being brave, joining us. And until next time, thank you all to those that are listening. It's very appreciative, very grateful that you guys are here. So thank you. And as always, please connect with us if you'd like. Would love to hear from you and any ideas you have about topics and things like that, or anything else.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are so grateful that you joined us. Check out the description to learn more about us and also for additional resources to help you on your journey.